you're like me, you spend lots of time poring over maps, looking at weather data, all in an effort to help predict when and where my best times to hunt will be. It'd be nice if there was a reliable source with all this information in one place. Enter the Spartan Forge app. Unlike some other predictive apps on the market, Spartan Forge was created from military combat intelligence experience tailored for hunters, and stands at the nexus of machine learning and white-tailed deer hunting. No more man-made algorithms. This is a predictive model based on real GPS collared deer data, historical and predictive weather, and the next level of mapping imagery, all at my fingertips. I've been using the iOS app this season, and it has replaced all my other mapping tools. Visit SpartanForge.ai and sign up today, or head to your iOS or Android app store. Use the promo code TRUTH to save some money and download it today. Mobile hunters, if you're interested in upping your mobile game, then head to tetherednation.com and check out their saddle gear. There are a few things you can actually buy that will help you become a better deer hunter or give you the freedom to hunt any tree or any situation. This is the reason why I started saddle hunting in the first place and why I use Tethered's gear. I can honestly say that Tethered's saddle gear has changed how I hunt for the better. Big tree, little tree, from the ground, it doesn't matter. I'm untethered by my gear to hunt the best setup for the situation, instead of hunting for a tree that my gear can use. My current core setup consists of the Phantom saddle, tethered one sticks, and the Predator platform, along with an assortment of their accessories. So if you want to up your mobile game, head over to tetherednation.com. Welcome to the Truth on the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast, brought to you by Spartan Forge. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 320. Today I'm joined by my buddy Tre Kerns to talk about chance meetings in an old warrior down. So stay tuned. All right. What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you're doing well. Hope you are feeling fine. Hope you are actually feeling better than me. I feel like 10 pounds of stuffed in a 5-pound sack. I went to jiu-jitsu training this morning and just took a throttling for a solid hour. But, it's good for the soul, I think. Humbling. And what they say is that, when you're getting beat, you're learning. When you're getting your ass kicked. So I guess I'm learning a lot. I guess is how I would frame it. It's like every day I go in, it's I'm learning. Don't know I'm doing a whole lot of teaching, doing a whole lot of learning. But for most of you guys out there, your season is probably wrapped up as much as it is mine. I'm special regs unit, so there is just a little bit more time left. But for all intents and purposes, things are wrapped for me as well, just with the obligations I have, like the next couple weekends and stuff like that. So at this point, I am kind of fully in kind of tinkering with my gear, which is like one of my favorite things to do, is kind of tinker around with different setups and what I might change for next year and things of that nature. And, the past 2 seasons I've not made huge changes. One of the things I kind of played around with was going back and forth. Maybe Greg and I will do a podcast, Litzinger, maybe we'll do one kind of about this and just stuff that we're changing up for this year. But I kind of went back and forth between a ring of steps and a platform this year for my saddle setup. And I did really like the ring of steps for certain setups. But I don't know, for some reason, like this year, last year I kind of used the ring of steps almost exclusively. And then this year I kind of went back and forth, and actually toward the end of the year, I really just kind of ran the Predator platform pretty much the last, several hunts that I did. I don't know. There's something about it that I just can't get away from. Like I just feel more comfortable in it. For me, it's a little easier to film out of it if I am taking a camera and stuff like that. But the one thing I've always kind of had an issue with is like the attachment method. I don't like the buckles, like just like the normal ones you would have on like a tree stand or whatever. I just don't like those. But I continue to use it because it's the only thing that I've used that I can kind of cinch down and like really put it in the spot that I want it to be in, especially if I'm trying to set up a camera or something like that. It's like if I'm using like VersaLinks or Versa straps or whatever, which I have used those in the past, and I do like them. They're quiet and things of that nature. They're light, don't have any metal, but I can't always necessarily get the platform where I want it. And so what I ended up getting recently, and I don't work with this fellow at all. It's just he makes some cool stuff. Is the Amsteel guy. He has like a USA, I think it's a tree stand and stick attachment kind of setup. And it's really kind of cool the way it sets up because it's all Amsteel. There's no metal, included. And this particular attachment method allows me to kind of attach it to the tree exactly where I want it, and it doesn't move. And like you just kind of cam lock it over, like the toe cam kind of method to kind of lock it in. If you need to, but it's the one method I've found that kind of gets it snug and tight to the tree, and you can use it for sticks and stuff like that too. And so that was kind of slick. So I was playing with that yesterday a little bit and just kind of shoot my bow in the backyard. And as soon as hunting season's over, it's like you already kind of miss it. And I'm already chomping at the bit to kind of get some scouting in and actually pull all the cameras that I still have out in the timber to see what deer might have made it through the year. And for the love of Mike, maybe find a deer that that showed up that I wasn't aware of locally, because it was quite a down year for this year. But we're gonna just kind of go ahead and get on with today's show. I do have a couple things to pass on to you guys, especially if you're thinking about gear just in general. The Great American Outdoor Show is coming up. I think it's February 4th through the 12th. I'll actually be there on February 4th. I think that's the opening Saturday. And I will be in the Exodus booth, which is in the archery hall. And additionally, in the archery hall is the tethered booth, and their booth number is 1033. So I'll kind of be bouncing between those two things. Also, our buddies over at Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, the Pennsylvania chapter, will have a booth there as well. If you're not familiar with these guys, you can head over to the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers .org/Pennsylvania. That's the website. You can kind of check out what they got going on from a PA chapter perspective. But if you don't know who they are, they're kind of this grassroots, organization that's been growing over the last several years. I find it hard pressed if you listen to this show, you haven't heard of them before. They've really, take a hold of, not just the organization, but their members, kind of drive the advocacy for public lands and fishing lands and access to waters and things of that nature. They also kind of speak up for wildlife, hunting heritage. They're big proponents of the Sunday hunting kind of movement in Pennsylvania and supporting that as well. They'll also have a booth at the Great American Outdoor Show in Harrisburg. They'll be at booth 4707 in the Outfitter Hall. Also on Friday, February 10th, they're going to have a gathering. They always like to have a gathering, every year during the Great American Outdoor Show. And they're doing it again this year on February 10th. It's Friday, February 10th. This will be at the Appalachian, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, Appalachian Brewing Company after the outdoor show for it's their backyard bash with a special guest, BHA President and CEO Lantani will be there talking. And it's always good to kind of share beers and share times with some like-minded folks, which you will find in this group. So to find out more, for the links to the event and the details and RSVPs and things of that nature, to let them know that you're interested in coming, check them out on Facebook and Instagram and at the URL that I had mentioned previously. So backcountryhunters.org/Pennsylvania. Also, before I get out of here, I want to give you guys a heads up. If you missed it, not sure how you did, because I posted it and it was all over the place on social, but our buddies over at Exodus have released pre-orders for their new Exodus Rival camera, which is their new kind of budget-friendly cell camera. You're getting the same reliable, hardworking, easy to use features that you come to kind of accustomed with Exodus, whether it's the lift or the render or whatever the case is. Over the last year, my buddies over at Exodus have been kind of working behind the scenes, building the next gen of cameras. One thing that they always do, and they do it, even when you're at the Great American Outdoor Show, if you're talking to them, the conversations you have with them at the booth don't go by the wayside, because they're always kind of listening to what consumers and what people have to kind of say in terms of how their products are performing. And ultimately how they're delivering, and they value that opinion, and they kind of take all that into consideration and create their next batch of cameras. And that's really where this Rival camera, this budget-friendly cell camera, came from, was exactly from that input from customers, and from folks that listen to these podcasts just like you guys. And so the Rival is a budget-friendly cell camera. It's coming in at a price of $179, and the camera just flat out works, and it's backed, of course, by the Exodus Advantage 5-year no BS warranty that you guys have heard me talk about plenty of times on this show. So just to drop a couple specs for you guys, so you kind of know a little bit about the camera before you see them at the outdoor show, or before you check out their YouTube channel and stuff like that with all their information. But it's 0.3 second trigger speed, 70-foot detection distance with adjustable sensitivity, which is nice. The 30-second photo transmission, adjustable image quality on upload photos, crisp HD images, It's compatible with the SP18 Exodus solar panel. That's something I use for all my cell cameras is a solar panel. And then once again, it has that 5-year no BS warranty. The Exodus Rival is officially open for pre-sales. I think it opened on January 16th. They did a launch video. They did some live streaming. So you can head to their website now, exodusoutdoorgear.com, and do your pre-order, because I think that is running just for a specific period of time, and the orders will begin to ship around February 6th. So be sure to use the code LAUNCH, LAUNCH, and that will save you $30 off each camera while supplies last, or until February 14th at midnight is when that sale will end. So head over to exodusoutdoorgear.com, promo code LAUNCH, and make sure you do that before February 14th. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into today's show. Having my good buddy Tre Kerns on. It's interesting that Tre and I actually met at the Great American Outdoor Show last year. We kind of tell that story of how we, it was kind of a funny misunderstanding, if you will, was kind of like our first kind of interaction with each other. But Tre's from West Virginia. He's a diehard bow hunter and just a hunter in general. And I would just more so classify him as like just a great and passionate outdoorsman. I'm always interested in these guys that, that yes, hunting or bow hunting is kind of like, the foundation maybe, or the thing that they're really, really interested in. But they're also, Tre's a great fisherman. He travels to fish and fly fish and things of that nature. And so he just has a really interesting perspective on how he spends his time in the outdoors, and is always aware of the blessings that should be counted anytime he's out there. And he had a hell of a season this year. And so we talk a little bit about his trip out west, and he absolutely put a slammer old warrior down in West Virginia. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into today's show. And as always, thank you all for listening. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today I have on a guy that it's been way too long. It's taken me way too long to have this guy on. We had an awkward meeting last year, and it became friends after this awkward meeting. I have on my buddy Tre Kerns. What's going on, man?
Hey, what's going on, buddy?
So do you remember the awkward meeting last year? So we were staying, just so people know, we were both hanging out with the guys at the Exodus booth in Harrisburg, and we were both staying at the Exodus house, because they get an Airbnb for like the full 2 weeks that they're going to be there, and just people that are coming in to podcast with them or to help them at the booth or whatever, can crash there if they want to. And do you remember the awkward? I mean, we spent the day together in the booth, but like it was like we busted a gut laughing like that night. Do you remember what it was about?
I can't honestly put a number on it.
Okay,
but,
all right.
refresh my memory.
Yeah, so we're getting something to eat, and I don't remember who it was, if it was Cameron or Chad or whoever, but ordered some beers and some food, and I think you and Cameron ran out to get the pizzas, and someone else brought like some beers in or whatever. I ended up ordering like Chick-fil-A because I didn't realize you guys were leaving to get pizza, and you guys came back, and I said something about like not being able to smell because I had just gotten over COVID. Like I had just passed like the time, like, that I could be like around people again. Like I was like 2 weeks past like the day that I was, had got it or whatever. And all you heard was like something about Rona, like, oh, it's cool, man. You thought I said, oh, it's cool, man. I got Corona. And you snapped.
Yeah. I was standing across the island there, and I kind of looked at you twice. I was like, wait a second. What the hell are you doing here?
You were like, what the hell are you talking about? It's cool. I got the Rona. Like, and I was like, no, dude. I was like, I just got over it. Like, you were like, okay, but your look on your face was hilarious, dude.
Like, all right, man.
You're like, oh, so it's this kind of party, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
couple beers and some pizza and Chick-fil-A fix all that, I guess.
Right, I guess, exactly, man. But how have you been, dude? How things been since we haven't really? I mean, we text every once in a while, like Instagram or whatever. Yeah. We haven't really been able to chop it up since almost a year ago. So how you been?
Yeah, good, man. Good. Staying busy. Just had a very enjoyable hunting season and been grinding. Even into the last part of season, really didn't get out a whole lot. Just been working a bunch and just staying busy. So
nice. You gearing up to scoop some sheds here soon, here in the not so distant future, man. We'll be
yeah,
shed season will be upon us.
Definitely. Yeah, some of my cameras been showing some deer dropping, and then I've been texting a couple buddies. We always get up, group it together in southern West Virginia every year, and we go for like 2 days and camp out and just have a good time. And
Nice.
We were talking about that the other day, just trying to plan out when we were going to go and try to get those numbers kind of put together.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. I know that northern piece that I hunt. I know I have a couple buddies up there, and they've been I mean, they've dropped as early as, man, I want to say even before Christmas. I think some dropped. I got a message from a guy that lives up there and was like, "Hey, found my first freshie," and he was out.
Yeah,
This was like before Christmas at some point. I think he was either out scouting or something. And
yeah,
and I know I haven't pulled my cameras. I haven't been up there actually since October into that area. And I know last year there was one particular shooter that was just trying to keep an eye on to see if he was going to make it through the season or not. And he did. I never saw him again this year, so I don't know if like the hard winter last year, like because we got a bunch of snow up in that area last year. I don't know if like the winter killed him or what happened, but he never showed again this year. At least any of the deer that I saw on camera, like the frame didn't look to be none of the frames looked to be him from last year.
yeah,
And
yeah,
but I know last year I think when I got a picture of him dropping, it was like, man, as soon as like gun season ended, so it would have been like the second week of September, he had dropped his like left side or something like that, which was
yeah.
like crazy early for, just in general crazy early. Like I typically never had deer drop that early. Do you usually get a crop of them that drop pretty early down around you?
Yeah, I usually get a few, and honestly, I mean, they're usually pretty consistent, based on each deer just annually. Just
Hmm.
they're usually pretty close in that time frame, unless like injury or something like that. But usually, most of my deer on my home farm, and then a couple of the private pieces I have in West Virginia, are usually after Christmas, kind of in that
Hmm.
first 2 weeks of January ballpark. But I've had deer. I mean, on my home farm, I mean, I've had deer. I had this one deer a couple years ago. I mean, he would relentlessly every year hold at least one side till April, and it was just
Wow.
like, man, he would hold on there, and then like it was like the velvet was already coming up before he was popping it off. So it's like, all right, man, sounds good.
Right, right. That's funny. I know. I mean,
Yeah,
shed hunting for me is like a little bit of a mixed bag. I always look forward to it because it's just another a nice reason to kind of get out and do some scouting and mess around. And
yeah,
I love taking the dog because he found his first shed last year,
yeah,
which was awesome. So I'm hoping this year because I suck at shed hunting. So I've taught him to try to find sheds. That way, hopefully, between the two of us, we find like 3 or 4. That's kind of the plan.
yeah,
But
yeah,
so I always look for more than anything, man. I don't know. I always just like going out and taking my dog out. Like there's something I've talked to Tony Peterson about this in the past, where there's something about, and there's a lot of truth to what he had mentioned to me. It's like there's something about taking a dog out in the woods with you, and I find when I take him with me, I scout a lot longer and I cover a lot more miles than when I'm by myself.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know. Do you find any truth to that as well? Do you have
No,
a
yeah, I do completely. I mean, I started out, my pup, as whenever he was real young, and I've kept him with me. And I think I think it exists also with him just being a great dog, with him just being able to go out there with me. He listens to me. He's been out there with me since, he was a puppy. So it's been pretty cool. I got on the gimmick and, bought that, soft antler and
Mhm.
got all that stuff. And, he actually visually, I don't think, smell is that great as far as like he got downwind of one, 50 yards away. I don't think he'd pick it up, but
Right.
visually, I mean, he's solid. I have
Yeah.
sheds laying around the house, and I'll throw him out in the yard and stuff. But if he sees it, he'll pick them up, and sometimes he'll get to him before I do. But
Nice.
yeah, it's always enjoyable going out there and taking him with me because one, it makes me feel better. I don't have to leave him at home, and
Yeah.
and he enjoys it, so
Yeah.
it makes it nice.
Yeah, yeah. Rocky loves that's his. I always tell my wife of like the winter and spring months that I get to go, either just scouting or shed hunting. I take him with me. I'm like that's his Olympics. Like he lives for that. Like that couple months out of
Yeah,
the year is like is his jam, and he does a pretty good job like around the yard, finding the shape and stuff like that. And I agree with you. The scent is not as much of a determining factor. I actually had the dog bone. I forget his first. Jeremy, I think's his first name. He owns the dog bone company where he's like actually trains gun dogs and bird dogs and shed dogs and blood dogs and stuff like that. And,
yeah,
I've had him on in the past, and he gave me some pointers for him, and I actually picked up his video and started working with him just on like different kind of training drills he would do with dogs that he was working on and stuff like that. And man, it made a big difference. Like I was surprised how you know I mean, he's a good dog. He listens well, and he's a lab, so I know he wants to do those things. But it always kind of shocks me how natural he is at picking it up. Like he just,
Yeah.
he's so smart. Like you show him something once or twice and he's all over it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, which is nice because, it doesn't take me much to kind of get him on, onto the shape of the shed and stuff like that. I think early whenever I was working with him, he was fine at using his nose because I noticed him using his nose a lot is because he was actually smelling my hand. And so I tried,
Oh, yeah.
that was the one thing Tony said to me. He was like, he's one thing they'll do in the yard is like they'll get good at the game, not necessarily finding the shed, but just good at the game you're playing. He's like, and the other thing is he's like, if you're using your bare hand, he's like, he's probably smelling you more so than he's smelling the shed. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I was like, it's a good point. So I started like using,
Yeah.
yeah. So I started
Never
using
thought of
gloves.
that.
Yeah. I started using gloves and stuff like that. Like just try to clean some gloves and like use those to throw. Um,
Yeah.
that way he's not picking up my scent. But man, you've got a lot going on, buddy. I think I saw you're growing your family at the same time. Is that right?
Yeah, man. Yeah. Got a little one coming in April and, super pumped about that. Just, I couldn't be excited for my wife and I. So we're just, kind of getting things ready. It's, juggling everything going on at home and then plus, trying to get the baby stuff ready to go. So, and
Oh yeah.
it's been a good experience for sure, and I'm excited for it to get here. So, and plus, it's perfect time, right? It's in April, it's not deer season, so
Perfect.
it worked out. It worked out great.
I know, right? You're gonna slide that in there, right, man? It's like they timed this up awesome. It's like
Oh yeah,
that Valentine's Day holiday. That's a tricky one for guys, man. They got to be careful about that
yeah,
one because
yeah.
if you,
You're
if you
right.
if you do the calendar math, man, you're playing with fire a little bit
Yep,
there.
yep. And I told her, when I married her, I said, "Listen here, honey," I said, "I'm not gonna be able to have a child anytime during hunting season, and that starts in August." She's like, "Well, okay."
That's awesome, man. But dude, you've had a pretty good run the past 2 years with some really good bucks, dude. Like I was just, I knew what you had going on this past year, and I knew from I think not this past year, but the year prior, I think you killed one out west in the Dakotas, if I'm not mistaken. And then you also
Yeah,
killed like
yeah.
a hammer also the same year in West Virginia, if I'm not mistaken, right? So you've had a pretty good 2 year run, and then you killed an elk this year, right?
Yeah, yeah. So killed 2 years ago was the first year Cameron and I went to the Dakotas, and man, what an experience out there. And we both had really good success out there on some public and some private out there, and we just kind of just pretty much shot in the dark, went out there and scouted our butts off, and just capitalized on that. But it was a great experience, and it's been really fun out there. So we went again this year, and Cameron absolutely killed it with an awesome deer. And I will admit, I got a little greedy. The scouting paid off, and I seen some giants, and I held off on some really good deer that I probably should have shot. With
Yeah.
only
Yeah.
having a limited amount of time there, I kind of probably should have pulled the trigger. But hey, it's okay. We're just enjoying it. So,
That's
but
right.
yeah, did that, and it was a great trip out there.
Man, so I've been victim of that, in the past as well. So talk to me a little bit. How do you kind of manage your expectations when you go into those kind of limited day hunts? You know what I mean? Because I know for me, it's like I'll often go in like so I'll have a plan. I'll just kind of say how I do it, and then I'd like to hear how you kind of do it because I screw
Yeah,
myself almost every time. I go in
yeah,
with a plan of like, this is what I'm kind of the experience I'm looking for, and I tell
hmm,
myself that, and I'm like, whatever the caliber of deer it is, and it's never, for me, it's never a giant. It's more of just like representative animal for the area. That's kind of
yeah,
like usually kind of where I start. Um, and then it's usually, day one or two, Kansas is a good example of this where it's like, man, I might glass like one or two where I'm like, goodness. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden it's like
right,
I
right,
start to get fixated, and then I
yeah,
spend like the
yeah,
entire trip chasing a ghost, so to speak. You know what I mean? And like
yeah.
maybe have some opportunities along the way and whatever the case is. But how do you kind of go about doing that? Because I think that's one of the hardest things when you travel hunt is just like when you make your plan, stick to your plan and not let, don't be a prisoner of the moment, so to speak.
Yeah, I think I guess a couple different parameters as I get older. Um, I guess a couple different parameters fall into place there. The biggest thing for me that really sticks out to me is location on where I'm at. Have I been there before?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Have I had success there already?
Mm-hmm.
And animals play a big factor. And I really expanded that this year and learned that just based on going out there and taking an elk in Idaho, I think if I had to go back to Idaho and realize all the effort I put into it, I don't think I would pass. I killed a 4x4. I don't know if I'd pass another 4x4 until I get to the point where I feel like, I always want to have something better. And we always seen, some giant bulls out there, but I really don't know, what my thought process is until I get out there and actually realize, okay, is it, obtainable to get to that point. Now with North Dakota, my thought process there is, I was already out there. Now, if I, for example, went to a different state, Kansas, for example, I'm going to draw that tag this year. You know, I haven't been there. So my expectations, I know the deer caliber are higher, but realistically, what's going to make me happy at the end of the day is what I'm going out there for.
Right.
And in North Dakota, I had that success in, the first year, and, I, killed a smaller buck, younger buck, but I was pumped. We were out there for 3 days. I was like, I'm coming out here
Heck yeah,
and
dude.
having some success. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
dude, especially
at the end of
3 days, like finding bucks in 3 days.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
and then I know in some of those plainsy types of areas, like you can glass and find bucks, but like to get within bow range of a buck to locate, get within bow range and let an arrow fly in 3 days, like, come on.
Yeah. And being out there really expanded my hunting. It just, not trying to deter the rail here, but just that really expanded my hunting because Cameron and I always, weigh stuff on Cameron weighs stuff on me. And, I always seen him hunting from the ground and really expanding his arsenal. And, that forced me to kind of do that out there with a limited amount of cover and trees out there. So, being able to do that was, I shot that deer at 6 yards on the ground. I mean, it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And this year going in there, I passed a really good deer, bigger than the one I shot the year prior. But it was just like I saw what was there. I've killed whitetails in my entire life, just being in West Virginia. So I had, I guess, a goal that I wanted to achieve being out there, and the deer that I passed on was not my expectations.
Right.
At least last year being out there, and I held to those, and I was just like, I'm happy either way. But I wanted that mature, 140, 150 plus caliber deer out there. And I was holding out for it. So.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
and I got close.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. I think that's the hardest part for some folks is that, not filling a tag isn't the worst thing ever. You know what I mean? Like, especially if you have like a goal in mind or something that you want to achieve, and as long as you frame it the right way, like if your goal is just to fill the tag when you go out there and you don't, well, then I understand how someone could be, disappointed in their hunt or whatever. But if you go out there and say, you know what, I'm looking for this and my goal is to have like an experience I've not had before. Right.
Right.
And just kind of appreciate the journey for whatever happens to kind of unfold. Then I think you set yourself up to have an enjoyable hunt, regardless of like whatever the tag outcome is. Especially like I don't think guys that don't do it consistently, like that don't travel a lot. I think sometimes that people don't realize like how hard that is to go somewhere on limited time. Even if you've been to a place, if you don't live there, it's different. Like especially if you're like hours and hours away, like it's not something easy to do.
Well, and perfect example about that jumps out at me is, Cameron and I went there last year.
Mm-hmm.
The crop rotation this year was completely different.
Yeah.
And it changed completely where the deer were. So, we were there, but it changed everything. And that goes with anything. I mean, look at, people that hunt, public land. I mean, I watch some of these guys that just absolutely get after it. And, you see these guys that literally change their tactics based on where the food is every year.
Mm-hmm.
And I see some of them guys just talk about, the mass was here last year. It's not here this year. And that's why the deer aren't here. Yeah. So there's scenarios that you deal with in other states that you can reference back to where you're from. So.
Right. And like to your point, so that was kind of what my season kind of, at least locally, held for me. I had, and I've belabored the point because I've talked about it before, but I had one encounter with one really good mature deer. It was a deer that I knew of, and I picked the right date. It's my favorite date to hunt, October 18th. And I went into this spot and he showed up and I watched him bed for 2 hours, at 40 yards. And he never got up and walked toward this scrape that I was kind of set up near because he could scent check it from where he was bedded. And he just walked out of my life. Now That was really the
Right.
only deer that I knew of in all the cameras that I ran. Cause, you know, and I've mentioned this before and I've talked to, you know, with Greg Litzinger about it and a couple different guys that are kind of
Yep.
localish to me. Like the acorn crop was just kind of wasn't great for me in my area,
Right.
you know, especially all the places I had scouted, you know, over the past, say 2 seasons where I was like, all right, I got some really great feed trees in these particular spots. Come through in September or August and kind of check to see what's holding and what's going to drop. And it was like literally not a single one of them was holding. Like I was like
Yeah.
snake eyes, and it just changed the whole game. So now take that, what you were just talking about, take that to where like even if you've hunted somewhere before in the past, right? So
Yeah.
say you've
Yeah.
hunted in Ohio somewhere in the past that you've found success before or whatever the case, or at least maybe you have familiarity, but that familiarity
Hmm.
is based on an acorn drop. Well, now those acorns didn't drop this year like you thought they were going to. Well,
Yeah.
you're at ground zero. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's like you're starting completely over. Like you have to just go to back to basics of just, okay, if I was a deer, where would I be?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, okay,
Yeah.
here's some deer sign. Let's follow that now, right? It's like and if you only have 5 days, man, it's like, you know, you should be happy to like, like my one buddy Mike went to Ohio this year for the first time, and he kind of ran into that same thing. And at the end of the as he was getting later in the hunt, and he didn't think, you know, it was going to happen or he wasn't going to fill his tag. He was like, man, I just wanted to find deer. He's like, because I was just
Right.
having the hardest time just finding deer, period. You know, and
Yeah.
sometimes that's where you have to start, and you have to kind of humble yourself a little bit and say, like, all right, the stepping stone now becomes this. Where I thought it was this, it's
Yeah.
actually this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so, man,
Well, it,
I'm
it
sorry.
doesn't
Go ahead.
help either when you have. No, I was just saying it doesn't help either when you have Aaron Helper running around the woods with cotton balls putting around your stand. So I feel bad for you anyway.
Nice. Oh man. What so I want to go back to that western hunt, dude, because that was
Yeah.
I know you've been out west like fishing, because I know you're a big fisherman. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I might need to get some pointers from you, because fishing's one of those things I would love to do. I just don't know that I need another hobby. Like
So that's the problem with me. The older I get, the more I get away from fishing and focus on hunting more and finding what's more important to me. So,
yeah, yeah. So so you've
yeah,
been out west before, but this was your first, you know, your first elk hunt. So I'm assuming
yeah,
it was end of August, or what time of year? And you said Idaho, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Idaho, yeah. I drew tag. Yep.
Yeah. So what time of year?
Yeah. So
What part of the year were you out there?
yeah. I think we left right around the 17th of September.
Okay, nice, sweet.
Yep.
Yeah, I was there. Were you in southern Idaho?
Yeah. Southeast.
Southeast. Okay, nice.
Yep.
So were you like? So what was the setup there? Were you truck camping? Were you kind of hiking in, camping at like, you know, at the end of a trailhead somewhere? What was that setup like?
Yeah. So we parked at the trailhead. And then it was 6.8 miles to the top of the mountain where we wanted to get to camp,
Hmm.
and packed everything in. Left some extra food and stuff like that in the truck in case we needed to come down and get it. But we packed in as if we were going to be there for 10 days,
Hmm.
because that was the camp. So we took everything with us. And once we got up on top, it was I think it was like 2.5, 3 hour hike to get up there.
Hmm.
And we got everything set up, and we pretty much got to the point where, Hunter was in that unit before, I think 3 or 4 years before. So he had some familiarity with that. But,
Okay.
like you said, everything can change from
Yeah.
year to year. So, we had a game plan. We wanted to get pretty high up in elevation to the point where we could kind of drop into some different funnels and systems to, get into some different bulls if we needed to, and just really glass a lot for the first couple of days before season came in.
Right.
So that was kind of the setup that we were initially thinking. And then, we just, once we got up in the morning, we could just disperse off the ridge and kind of go where we needed to go.
Right. Now, roughly how far would you say? Because my setup was similar to that. It wasn't. I think it was like 2 miles is what it was to get to the top of this particular mountain,
Yeah.
and then from there, you know, like in the past when I've elk hunted, like it was some long ass walks. Like,
Yeah.
you know, it was pretty usual for us to do. You know, I forget how many years ago this was. Whenever I was in Montana, like an average day would have been like 8 miles, 9 miles. That would be like an
Yeah.
average day. There was one day I think we did 15 or something like that on that trip. This trip was a lot different because of where we were kind of camped, to where it's like most days we were really only covering probably like 6 miles. You know what I mean? Was probably like the average? Some days it might have been a little bit more, some days it might have been a little bit less, but what were your hikes like to get into where you were actually going to hunt?
Yeah, so we were tracking all that. Over, I think I ended up harvesting on the seventh or eighth day,
Hmm.
and I think we were averaging. I think our total, like our biggest day was like 26 or 27 miles, but I
Whew.
think we were averaging somewhere around like 15 to 18 miles a day.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's where we were. But honestly, I mean, we're two young guys and we were just trying to cover as much ground as possible to figure out, where these bulls were. We
Hmm.
were on bulls every single day. I mean, I missed a really good bull the second morning. Drinking your coffee, actually.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
swear, I was drinking your coffee, and that bull came bugling, screaming up through there, and I missed him at 62 yards. So,
Oh man.
uh, but yeah, it was pretty cool. I mean, that was kind of just being able to cover that much ground. I'm sure some people don't do that,
Hmm.
but I think that was a really good reference as far as us being able to get on bulls every day, being able to cover that much ground.
Yeah, and I don't think well, that's a lot. I'll say that, but I think that people probably that live out there and that's what they do. I'm sure that that's probably pretty familiar. For me, where I was at, I was in actually northern Idaho, so it was just like big thick timber to where you really couldn't glass. So a lot of what we were doing was, my buddy Wilson lives out there, and so he had kind of pre-scouted, hung some cameras, and we kind of had an idea where there was where elk wanted to spend some time, and so it was almost a lot of like still hunting and still hunting through like in and around or near like what we thought to be, and some that were confirmed bedding areas. And
Yeah,
so, because man, we were in elk most every day. You could hear them. They might be 30 yards away and you still couldn't see them. It was that dense. And
yeah,
so it was just so different from whenever I was in Montana, because I was in, southern Montana down near the border of Idaho the last time. And it was similar to what you're talking about, where it's like, man, we could get up on a ridge, or a high point, and we could just glass and just watch,
yeah,
you know, elk for multiple days and get a sense of what they wanted to do and how they wanted to move. And then like, okay, we've watched this herd for 2 days. They've done this 2 or 3 different days in a row. So now let's go in and see if we can't, pull a bull out of that or whatever. We would know
yeah.
how many bulls were with them or whatever the case was. Um, so yeah, this year for me was a, a pretty good kick in the pants and quite the learning experience.
Yeah.
But so you missed that one. So how did the hunt
Yeah.
actually play out for this one? What went down with the one you actually killed?
Yeah. So we were trying to think what we did that morning. So we dropped down off the ridge. So we were towards the later half of the hunt. Um, we started. It was crazy because I've heard like people say, and what people say and what you actually believe are two different things. But people
Hmm.
were always saying like, man, like when a bull gets with a cow, like they're like turkeys. They're
Hmm.
just like very vocal. They kind of are always like locked down with that hen or that cow is the reference. But
Hmm.
so we were coming off there, and this bull the last 2 days was in the same spot every single night. He would come back to this ridge and bed with this cow in the same spot, and then he would scream the whole night in his bed and just bugle in his bed the whole night.
Hmm.
So we had a game plan. The day I killed, we had a game plan. So I remember this. We went down over the ridge, and Hunter and I were sitting there trying to put a game plan together. I said, "Listen," I said, because the day before we kind of stayed back and we're trying to get them to come to us because we had several other bulls kind of around us. So we were just kind of getting one of them to come to us, but it didn't work out. So
Hmm.
that morning we were just like, let's go at him. And it's just like, as I was doing this, I was thinking, man, it's like, getting underneath that turkey as he's roosting. I was just like, this
Right.
is crazy. So, I'm sitting there crawling and stuff and trying to get as close as I possibly can. And I think I got to like 80 or 90 yards and there was this big tree and kind of in between us. So I kind of used that as like a shield to
Right.
get, up close to him. And I could see his tines and he was bedded with the cow. And Hunter was back behind me and he cow called a couple times and everything. And I was sitting there. And as soon as he stood up, I mean, immediately as soon as he stood up, he didn't waste any time. Immediately pushed her right into the timber. And
Hmm.
I was like, man, and it was a big 6x6. We watched him for 2 days. We just couldn't close the distance. And I got,
Right.
that close to him, but just couldn't move left or right to get an open, shot. And then he didn't, like I said, he busted her into the timber and was pushing her. So,
Right.
so anyway, so we hiked around all day just trying to figure things out. And we figured we seen a giant bull, the one I think probably the biggest one of the trip, down in this like wallow area. It was just this overgrown brush with aspens around. It's a really beautiful area down there in the bottom. And we got down in there and glassed around a little bit, and I am absolutely horrible on using a cow call, by the way. So anyway, whenever we get the video edited, it's really funny because I mean Hunter was trying to teach me how to do this the entire time, and I literally thought I was just the best cow caller in the world, and I sound like somebody beat me with a crowbar while I was doing it. So anyway,
beating me with a crowbar. That's awesome.
Oh man, it was bad.
Be careful. Hunter's you need to patent that before Phelps comes out with that. The beat me with a crowbar cow call.
Yeah, no kidding. But yeah, so Hunter was behind me, and I was a little bit off to kind of his 45, and we were cow calling. Well, he was cow calling, I was crow calling back and forth, and and we were just trying to initiate two cows calling back. But like I said, I had no idea what I was getting into when it came to elk hunting. I was there to shoot something and figure this out along the way. So Hunter was teaching me everything, and I was just cow calling back and forth with him. And all of a sudden, I look back at Hunter, and I'm like, there's this draw that, like, where Hunter's position, he can see, I mean, straight ahead of him for 300 yards. I mean, it's just this big, long stretch. Well, I was kind of off, like I said, to the 45. So I'm like adjacent to that long stretch. So I can't see very far down the gut. And
right.
I look back at Hunter, and he's like got his camera up and like filming. And I'm just like, what is he looking at? So he stopped cow calling. Well, as I turned my head back around, this bull is just coming right down that draw. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is going to happen.
Right.
So I'm sitting there on the ground, and I get my stuff ready, and I'm a nervous wreck. And I remember I was range finding him, and he was at 65. And I remember I literally couldn't press my button fast enough on my trigger to get ranges because I was so nervous. And I kept going. And he was 55 and then 40. And then when he got to, I think 38 or 35, I went to step my rangefinder back down, and I have a pouch for my rangefinder, but I was so nervous, I literally just laid it on top of my bino harness. So when I did that, it was the dumbest thing in the world, because when I went to draw, it fell off of my. Luckily, I had that stretchy band against it, so it fell off my bino harness. And when I did that, that bull was perfectly at a broadside. And when I did that, that bull turned and kind of stepped quartering to. And I was at full draw, and I said, "Oh, I'm not missing this opportunity." And I sunk it right in front of his front shoulder, at a kind of like a frontal shot, right in front of his front shoulder. And he ran about, I don't know, 40, 50 yards and stood there, and he coughed. And then I seen him stagger a little bit, and he fell right over.
You got to be kidding me.
I swear, right on camera. I mean, fell over. Hunter and I were going nuts. We were hooting and hollering and screaming, and we were just, it was unbelievable. It was really, it was probably one of the coolest experiences I've ever had in my life.
That's awesome, man. Especially to watch them fall. Cause that's, I mean, the big animals, right? I mean, they can haul ass for a little ways,
Oh yeah.
With, archery equipment and stuff like that. And so, you must've had a money shot on that. I know that Montana trip, my buddy and I, we had a good bull that was kind of coming right to us. And long story short is he was calling, and he was trying to get one in range for me because he lives in Montana, and we had one that was wanting to work, and it started working toward us. And he was like, I'm going to run up the side of this ridge and see if I can't pull him across broadside to you so you get a good shot. When he went to move, I could see the bull's, antlers coming through the timber. And so he couldn't move. And so we basically stood there, and we were on a down tree, and there was a big limb, and I was on the right side and he was on the left side, and that bull came head on to us. And we basically were like, as he's approaching us, I'm like, if he comes right at us, like if he goes your way, like shoot him. Like I don't have a shot toward you. Like that limb's in my way to where I can't shoot to my left. And well, the limb was in his way where he couldn't shoot to the right. So we're like, whichever way he turns, one of us takes the shot, and that's, and my buddy shot him. He ended up turning what would have been to our left, the bull's right. And he just center punched him, heart shot, and he walked 40 yards and just fell over. And that was it. Yeah. It was the craziest thing. It was like a 26-yard shot, the bull screaming in our face. So, I mean, I get what you're saying, man. Like, it's crazy to see. I'm curious. So, your first couple encounters with bulls, especially, you saw that big one even that day, before you killed the one you killed. and you're
Yeah.
listening to them bugle and stuff like that. Like, what was your thought for the first time seeing like a live elk in the wild, like ripping bugles?
Mm. I, I don't know if you can put an expression on it. I mean, it's just something that you just sit there and you're thankful for just to have the experience. Hunter and I sat there a couple nights filling up our waters and stuff with the filters down there in the bottoms, and we were sitting there just watching shooting stars that go across, and
Mm-hmm.
we were just having a good conversation, just about life, and just saying like how it's sad some people don't even get to experience this and realize what's out here.
That's it. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure, man.
Yeah.
It's
So I mean, I guess that ties back into that whole experience on listening to them elk, and just it's just an amazing feeling just being able to be out there with them and just understand like this is just. I mean, this is public land. I mean, this is
yeah,
what This is what you want to come out here for and experience. The West is something people need to cherish more. I'm telling you, it's unbelievable.
yeah, yeah. I couldn't agree more, man. I mean, it's in my first trip, I remember like I came back a little bit of a changed person.
Yeah.
I think it's good for people, however you get it, whether it's going out west and hunting or doing hard things, to humble yourself or whatever. But, for me, it's a nice reminder of like, how small the space is that I occupy. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you
Yeah.
get into that vast land like that, especially when you get into areas like where you were at, where you could glass for like a long ways, right? And you can just,
Yeah.
you get a sense of just like, I can't even see past what my eyes are capable of seeing in this horizon, but there's so much beyond that. And then to think that like, and this is still just a speck in the grand scheme of things. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's unreal. And then for me, at least, like seeing elk like up close and bugling, because that one before my buddy killed it was at 26 yards and like ripped a bugle right in our face. And it's just like, it went through your chest. And
Oh
it was
yeah.
just, it was like, I was like, these things are like dinosaurs. I was like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was the only thing I could compare it to. I was like, I've never seen anything like this. They're like dinosaurs. They're real life
No.
dinosaurs.
Yeah. It's something amazing. I mean, and it's a physically I guess physically it's not too demanding. I mean, you can overcome, right? You
Yeah.
can, you can get yourself in shape, right? It
Hmm.
definitely helps, but you can always slow the process down
Yep.
throughout your hiking, throughout your, hauling your meat out, that kind of thing. But mentally, I will be the first to say, I mean, it was a mental check for me. And I feel like I'm pretty mentally strong, but I'm telling you, just being out there in the elements, going from, 25 one night in snow and rain and thunder to, 70. And it just, I mean, it really is a mental thing out there to make sure that you're just able to mentally check in, recheck yourself after a couple of days and just, set the goal and make sure you're staying on path for what you're wanting to accomplish out there.
Yeah, man, because I mean, it's the weather out there changes at the drop of a hat. That like
Yeah.
is one of the things. It's like, because you're right, like the physical part of it, you can check that. You can either limit how much you're willing to move, right?
Yep.
And then you can, not just like, I can only do so many miles. Like you can change that every day just based on how tough the terrain's going to be that you're going to go. It's like, if it's not going to be tough terrain, it's like maybe today I can do 9. If it's going to be really tough terrain, it's like maybe, depending on how in shape you are, you like might be able to like, hey, I might only be able to do 4 today. Like whatever it is,
Right.
you can make those accommodations, but there ain't a whole lot you can do for Mother Nature. She's going to do what she's going to
No.
do, and
No.
you're just going to be along for the ride. And then
Yep.
you just better have good gear and be able to withstand because she could be unrelenting in those mountains.
Yeah,
But
yeah, it really was. I told somebody a couple of times, and they asked me how the stories were, and I said I've never in my life ever seen it thundering, snowing, raining, and wind of 50 miles an hour all in the same process, all at the same time. And I was just like, it literally it can happen. It
yeah,
about 10,000 feet elevation, it does it.
yeah,
So
yeah, exactly. Especially
yeah,
when you get up there in that elevation, man. That's where it
yeah,
gets like it can get western,
yep,
real
yep,
quick because things just change. And then you also have the altitude and stuff to deal with too. You know what I mean? Like
yep.
that's for some people that's a real challenge. Where
Yeah, yeah. I didn't experience it. People told me, just, be patient, see how that does, make
mhm,
sure you can breathe all right. But I didn't, I didn't feel it. Maybe I'm younger. Like I
mhm.
said, I don't know, but maybe I need to go a little bit higher in elevation. But yeah, I think we were right at that, 9,800,
Yeah.
10,000. right there. So that's kind of where we were when we camped. Now, when we were hunting most places, I think we were somewhere in between. I think I killed my bull at I think around 8,400.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
kind of where we were
I'm
at.
familiar. I'm somewhat familiar with the terrain because where I was at in Montana, like I was almost on the border of Idaho, probably not far from where you were at, and that's roughly about the elevation that we were at. And you could feel it a little bit, maybe like the first day. Now this was some years ago when I was in Montana. I want to say I was probably 35, 36 then,
Yeah.
maybe. Um, and it didn't really bother. I mean, I could tell like the first day kind of hiking or whatever, where it was just like, it wasn't like it was hard to breathe, but it was just I couldn't get as much air as I was typically used to. Then after like day two, it's like I was fine. It was no issue. You know what I mean? It's like, but it was just it wasn't like it was keeping me from doing anything. I just noticed it was all.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, that's awesome, dude. I'm glad you got to experience that trip, dude. Because that's I'm looking forward. So I'm not going out west this year. I have a plan or a Western roadmap, if you will, that should kick in next year. That next year going forward, I should have points to draw a different species in a different state every year in like perpetuity. So
That's awesome.
yeah, so I'm not sure what I'll get to draw next year, but it'll either be, I think my states are Montana, I want to say Wyoming, and I want to say Utah, I think are the three states that I'm getting points for. And then it's elk, antelope, and Colorado's the other one. Colorado, I'm gaining points for mule deer. So it's elk, antelope, and mule deer is what I'm getting points in these different states for. So I'll be going somewhere every year. I won't know where until, January or February every year. So.
Right. Well, that's good. I mean, at least you'll be able to have an idea that you're going to go somewhere probably.
Yeah, I know I'm going to get on the turnpike and go west at one point.
Yeah. Well, I tell people when I talk to them, I always say, you got to be prepared for anything out west because it'll throw anything and everything at you.
Right.
And I've only been out there, one time hunting, but I can certainly see being out there fishing and then, hunting now. It's just, I mean, you just have to be prepared for any possible situation.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of the cool places you want to go to also have grizzly, so that's the other thing to kind of prepare for as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad we didn't have anywhere we were because that the one night we were trying to get back, like I said, we camp up on top of this ridge system, and then when we start off in the morning, we kind of just hit that ridge and then kind of funnel down to where we wouldn't need to go, and we were working our way back, and we had two bulls up on the ridge that we were trying to get back to bugling, and long story short is we ended up not making it. We didn't want to bump those bulls out, so we literally got up underneath a root ball, made a fire, and camped out there all night and slept not in our tents. We slept on the ground, cuddled up to each other, just like trying to stay warm the whole night.
Oh man, that's awesome. That's the experience right there, man. That's killer. I can't say that I've done that. And I can't say that I know anybody who has either. So
it was pretty crazy.
Yeah, where we were at was there's a grizzly population where I was at, so it was a little weird I was fine, with it. It was like, they live here. It is what it is. Don't do anything stupid, and nothing stupid should happen type of thing. But, it was always just like an extra precaution. Like they always, definitely making sure you hang your food and like, just keep a super clean camp and stuff like that, just cause they are in the area, you know what I mean? So, and they live there and I don't, I'm a visitor, so it's their place. So, but, all things went well, but I know some of these other places that I'm getting points for, it's like even more of a dense, population in some of those areas. So, we shall see, we'll make preparations and be as careful as we can and respect their distance.
It just all adds to the experience, right?
That's it, man.
I remember being fishing a couple times and seeing some grizzlies out, and I was just like, okay, I'm going to get off the stream and get out of my way.
Yeah. You can have this one, bud. It's all yours.
Yep.
Nice. So, man, I know, I know you live you're in West Virginia, right? And I know this past year, if I'm not mistaken, you were kind of diving more into public land this year, right?
Yeah. I wanted to take a dive into that and played with it a little bit, just inquiring, walked around a little bit, but I really wanted to get into just figuring out public land. I've talked to, Chad and Cameron a little bit about it. And like I said, this year I really dove into it full board about this time last year and started really scouting and putting some boots on the ground and just trying to figure it out. So,
Right.
and my cameras are still there. I need to go get them.
Right. Nice. What so
Yeah.
what intrigued you about it? Like what was the I guess the launching point of like, hey, I want to just kind of, take this exploration.
Yeah, well, I guess it came to the point where I've been hunting private my entire life,
Mhm.
up until really last year,
Mhm.
2 years ago, really, when I went to North Dakota, and you know, being able to just, I guess, not have a boundary
Mhm.
on, where you can go. If you bump a deer, who cares? Go to the next, get the next one.
Yeah.
And I guess that mentality just kind of intrigued me as far as just having a bigger playground to go after and chase animals that I just have a passion for.
Mhm.
And so, I kind of just started diving into it. And then I kind of went full tilt and put a bunch of cameras out this year. I think I hunted public twice this year.
Mhm.
And just was kind of a learning year for me. I had one deer that I saw that I wanted to go after.
Mhm.
And it felt like it was a good opportunity, but didn't end up capitalizing on it. But put a bunch of cameras out, spread them out on areas that I thought were really, really good. And like I said, I got a bunch that I need to go pull, and it's going to be pretty much all day. Sit here in front of the computer, run through cameras, figure out what the deer we're doing this year, and then kind of put a game plan together for next year and give me a better idea of where I need to go.
Nice. So what's that terrain look like there? I mean, I'm somewhat familiar just because I've hunted, in close to southern West Virginia. I guess I'll say.
Yeah, yeah.
But just for people out there that are listening that maybe don't have a good frame of reference of what that might look like. What's the terrain and stuff look like in that particular area?
Yeah, you got big elevation changes. I mean, you got bottoms. You got a bunch of ridge systems that kind of funnel into those bottoms. You got saddles, and it's just a lot of topography change. You got some benches and stuff that kind of wrap around. You got properties that have been whether it's been strip mined, whether it's
Mhm.
been timbered before by the state. I mean, you got a bunch of different things that kind of play into factor. But I like hunting. I guess I grew up here, so I like hunting topography. I like being able to bounce around, really find out and funnel those deer into a certain area.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's just steep terrain.
Right.
So
Or now those ridge tops, what I'm familiar with in that general kind of region is just like those ridge tops are almost more like spine backs to where they're not real wide. They're and a lot of times they're getting traveled at night. Is that similar terrain there? Are they spine backs or do you have or in that area or do you have more, wider kind of I guess ridge tops, if you will?
no, you're right. They're more spine. I mean, you'll get some wider ridge systems, but most of them are pretty much just, I mean, straight up and straight down on the other side. I mean,
Right.
that's normally how it is. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it makes it interesting. I mean, you don't see a whole lot of deer bedding on there. They're usually on the faces, but
Hmm.
it makes it nice for being able to kind of figure out which side they're going to be on based on wind direction and that kind of thing.
Yeah. What was crazy to me in hunting that type of topography in that region was just, you know, conventional wisdom would tell me, deer are, they like the path of least resistance, right? And so like you
Hmm.
find like the low kind of saddle areas or whatever that they can get up over one ridge over to the next or whatever the case was. But man, I don't know how many times I've either had trail cameras or saw it while I was in a tree of deer just putting it in a four low and like ripping right up over the top of those steep ass ridges. Like, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like that, I mean,
Yep.
I know some will do it, but like it happened way more frequently than I would have would have imagined. And that was
Yeah.
one thing that like I had to kind of take into consideration where I was like, man, especially those mature deer, it seemed like they were no stranger to just kind of ripping right up over the top and they weren't necessarily looking for the easy path through from one ridge system to the next, especially when you were getting into that like late October, early November kind of time frame.
Yeah.
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 So
I've seen some deer just absolutely just haul it up one side and down the other, and they just don't even blink twice about it.
no.
It takes me 30 minutes to get down to one
I
side.
know, I know, man. Because some of that stuff is steep, dude. I mean, some of it stuff's like you
Yeah.
basically grab tree to tree and slide down. You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
there's been
Yep.
some places, but so dude, I know this past year, man, you killed an absolute warrior of a buck. in West Virginia. I mean, that thing, I'm looking at the picture now, dude. The neck on that thing is just ridiculous. And the bottom is just a big bodied deer. So it sounded like, at least from what I saw, like on your posts and stuff, that you had some familiarity with this deer before before this hunt.
Yeah, so we we had pictures of this deer a couple years prior, and it acquired some type of injury to some sort, whether it was hit by a car or shot in the chest. Something was going on because it was throwing some funky horns. But we
Hmm.
knew this deer was mature, just I mean, based on the body size and just how it carried itself. And I've not once until the day I shot it, I never seen it out of the tree stand once,
Hmm.
ever. And I think my buddy Dalton seen it, one time, and I think it was last year, the year before, and he passed on it. Just like I said, it was throwing some funky horns. But this year we got pictures of this summer, real tall, tight rack, and we were, watching it and everything. We're like, well, maybe we'll shoot it this year. It was throwing kind of a cool, tall rack, and it kind of a normal rack for once in its life. And
Hmm.
anyway, so yeah, so anyway, it ended up playing out, and got a chance at getting a crack at him. I saw him, I knew instantly what deer it was, and I thought,
Right.
holy crap, like finally for once I get to see this deer. So
So how many years did you have him on? How many years did you have him on camera?
2019.
2019.
So
Right. So this would have been
was
three
the first
years.
year.
Right.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And so your buddies had seen him from the tree. You've never seen him from the tree. Like where were they seeing him versus like where you were setting up and not seeing him? Like how was he continuing to skirt you, or like what was his? I guess since you had 3 years of data on him, like what was your thinking? Like how was he moving? I guess is like what I'm asking.
Yes. So I kind of knew where he was, like general
Like
area,
bet
but I didn't
his bedding
really.
area. Is that what you're?
Yeah, but I wasn't necessarily chasing him because he didn't have like a. There was way bigger deer that I was chasing, so I was
Right.
just like, you know what I mean. So I was just like, well, I'm not really worried about him. If I see him, I see him. But
Hmm.
if he shows up, he shows up. I wasn't really focused on him. But anyway, so based on where my buddy seen him, it was kind of to the east of me, probably I don't know, 200-300 yards. And I believe he was bedded kind of in between us, is kind of where he was based on the general direction he came from all the time and
Hmm.
just how thick that area was down there in that bottom. So I'm pretty sure he was kind of bedded in this big thicket.
Hmm.
And he just worked that entire thicket back and forth down through there. And there were several big deer in that area. But yeah, that day, I kind of went down in there. I was either after him or another deer that we had on camera pretty frequently, and it was just a crappy, cloudy November day that I love, and
Hmm.
it worked out. It worked out great. So
So what was your setup for him? Like so you were going in either after him or one other deer, and
yeah,
what date was this? This was like November. I'm trying
I
to
think it was the second week. I think.
yeah, November 14th is when the post was. So it was some
Yeah, so I think it was the 13th.
13th. Okay. So it's November
Yeah,
13th. So we're getting a little later in well, about the time they start, the big ones start making mistakes at that point, right? It's
yeah,
like,
yeah. So yeah, so he or another deer, whoever, laid down a really good scrape kind of right in that general area, and we had a permanent lock on down at the very bottom of this trail. And anyway, the wind, I hunted it prior to that, like 2 weeks before, and the wind was not very good for that lock on. So I hung a stand, actually I didn't hang a stand. I sat in my saddle like right off of that um, scrape that was like, I mean, it was like 7 yards below
mhm.
me, and it was just kind of in that perfect little area right there. But the wind that day when I went after him was, not good for that saddle spot. So I hiked in there and I sat in there. I was prepared for a whole day set because I knew it was supposed to be gloomy, and then the storm was rolling in around like 10 o'clock, and it was supposed to dump it till from like 10 to 2. And
Mhm.
my dad and Dalton were down there with me. And, they went in and got their bellies full and probably had a couple of beers, honestly. And, and I was sitting there and I was like, you know what, I'm going to hold out here. I really think once this rain stops that, something's going to get up on its feet. And,
Mhm.
anyway, so I sat in that lock on, and kind of three funnels kind of come to one point there right in front of us there.
Okay.
And, we have a giant, like, gravity feeder that kind of sits like right off of there, and then
Mhm.
there's a like that scrape was there's a bunch of scrapes coming down those roads that where they were funnel into that one section.
Mhm.
Well, we get pictures of them coming to kind of that general area, coming to grab food out of the protein feeder all the time. We're like,
Right.
okay, well, this deer's got to be kind of in this general area, and we're sitting there, and or I was sitting there, and you know, I was going to get down, and my dad and them were like, we're going in. And I was like, I'm not walking because it's a hike to get back. It's like on the backside of the property. It's actually absolutely horrible access in and out.
Are you
But I
serious?
was like, yeah. So I was just like, I'm going to go in and sit and not move all day. And the wind was good walking in. Like, I was like, well, I have a general idea where he's at. The wind's not going to be blowing down to where he's at when I come in. So I was like, I think I'll be okay. So like I said, I got in there quiet, seen a couple deer that morning, and at I think 10 o'clock, it started pouring rain down like I thought, and I looked at my watch, and I think it was like 1:32, and my dad and Dalton said they were getting ready to head back to get in the stand, and I remember it being around 2, and the rain was kind of slacking off a little bit, and I look up, and he is coming down the road right down to me, and he gets to about 30 yards, and he's facing me. And I was like, well, it's either going to be a chip shot or he's going to bust out of here. And of course, being any mature deer he was sitting there nosing the whole way down through there trying to get my wind. And
Mhm.
the wind was swirling a little bit with that rain stopping. So it was kind of picking up a little bit. And he caught my wind, and he knew something was up. So I kind of sat there real still, and he was looking, trying to find me. And I knew when he turned, I was going to try to draw and shoot him as he was turning broadside, but I thought he might have stopped and kind of just as he was in a rotation, he turned all the way back around, and he didn't. He turned immediately 180 degrees, started walking back up the road.
Hmm.
Well, I went full draw when he turned, and when he did that, I was counting his steps, and I was like, okay, I know he's at 30 roughly. I was like, and I was counting his steps. I was like, okay, he was right roughly at about 40 42 yards is what I was thinking. And I knew I shoot a lot, and I take pride in shooting a
Mhm.
lot to make sure I can make this shot. So I knew if I grunted at him with my mouth, I knew he could probably turn a little bit, and he was not scared enough that where he was going to run, I thought he would just kind of be like, what was that? So
Right.
he turned enough just slightly when I grunted that I thought, okay, if I put it right in front of his, hind leg, that it'd come out his opposing shoulder. That's how hard he was quartered. So I was like, I
Right.
was thinking about that. And I said, I'm going to do it. So whenever I grunted at him, he turned, and I sat there, and I sunk my 40 pin on him, and I punched it, and I hit him good right where I was thinking. And I was like, holy crap, like he took out there like scolded dog. And it was like a bunch of brush up to the top left. And anyway, so I texted my dad and Dalton and ragged on them a little bit and told them, you should have stayed, you should have stayed in the stand. I told you guys.
Right.
And they were like, "You're the luckiest guy ever." And I'm like, "No." I was like, I knew it was going to happen. So anyway, so I backed out because I wanted my dad and Dalton to continue hunting, and I kind of sat there for a little bit, and I was like, "Well, I'll just come back in the morning." I didn't see him fall; it was getting dark at that point. I shot him at 2-3 o'clock, but I was letting Dalton and them hunt, so I just kind of worked my way back to the side by side. And
Mhm.
um, anyway, so we come back in the morning, and I was, kind of all shaken up. I was like, man, I hope we find this deer. Like, he ran out of there pretty hard, and I didn't go look too far and didn't see a whole lot of blood. And heck, he didn't go 50 yards up in there and fell over. And I was just like, well, that was an easy track job. So,
Right.
but yeah, it was just cool, just the whole experience, just being able to get that buck off there with him being old and mature, and then having confidence in the shot placement and being able to execute that shot, because it's never a shot I've ever taken, and it was I don't know if I want to take another shot like that if I don't have to. So
Right. Right. That's
yeah,
awesome, man. That's a good shot, dude. You know what I mean? Especially if he just ran up there and dumped over at 50 yards anyway, man. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
I mean that you can't ask for anything more than that. How old do you think that he is? I mean, did you send his teeth in or anything like that to get aged?
I have them. I was going to probably send them in. If I had to guess, I would say the deer is between 6 and 8 years old.
Right, because I was gonna say you have 3 years of trail camera pictures of him.
Right, and he was a big body deer 3 years ago, or
Right.
2019. I mean, you saw him and you're like, dear Lord, that deer don't have any horns to match him.
Right.
Uh, but but yeah, he had something going on. The closer we got up to him, he had scars all over his neck and his chest. Like, I mean, and not just a tine or anything. It was a significant scarring on his chest. But to add to that story, we got him back and started skinning him out, and he had, like, I don't know if it was gangrene, but he had green stuff all in his, like, muscles and meat, and the meat. And as soon as we cut him open, the meat smelled absolutely horrible.
Oh, wow.
And it was cold. It was cold that night. I mean, it was 20-something degrees, so I wasn't worried about leaving him over. And yeah, I mean, it smelled horrible. We looked at it and we were like, I don't know about it. Like, so anyway, it could have been gangrene from the infection, but the more I was trying to educate myself and read up on it, but I think gangrene usually sets in pretty quickly after an injury. It doesn't, like, linger.
Right.
But I read something, and the EHD was, sometimes happening. We had it a couple years ago. They said EHD sometimes could turn meat sour, or do some type of thing to meat. So I read that before, but anyway, but something was going on, but the meat was no good. So,
oh, dang, man, that stinks, man.
Yeah, that's the worst part there.
yeah, I know, right? It's always nice to have a freezer full. You know what I mean? But it's a killer story, though, man. I mean, he's a hell of a buck. I think it's so cool whenever people have an opportunity to kind of know a deer, for a couple years or whatever, and be able to hunt him. There's one particular deer that I've watched now for 2 years, and it's in the piece that I've been kind of learning over the past 2 seasons, and he made it through this year again. And I'll send you some videos of him when we're done here, some trail camera videos of him, because he's a hammer. And if I find, I honestly don't care if I find a single shed this year, but if I do find a shed, I'm hoping it's one of his, because he's a brute. And I try not to go into a season like trying to hunt a particular deer. I usually like to have, like, there's 3, 4, maybe 5 deer in this particular area that I'd be happy to shoot any one of them, type of thing. Otherwise, I start to drive myself a little crazy, obsessing over one particular deer that doesn't want to play the game with me the way I want to play it. You know what I mean? Yep. So cool, man. Well, I want to be sensitive to your time here, dude. And I appreciate you coming on, but I have one last question for you before I let you get out of here, if you're ready.
Yep.
All right. The basketball question, dude. You're building a basketball team, a 3-person basketball team. They have to fill tags, antlered whitetail tags, any state, doesn't matter. It could be wherever. These people could be dead or alive. You have to pick 3 people to fill tags, and your life depends on it. Who you picking? You can know them or not know them. They could be famous, not famous. They could be the guy down the street. They could be alive. They could be no longer with us. It's, your team. It can be anybody you want. Who are those 3 people?
Okay. All right. I'm going to go a little bit unorthodox here, because everybody always says, and respect to those guys, Andy May, Jake Bush, those guys, they're, elite above their class, and they're great on what they do. But I'm going to go with a couple people that, I think personally that I've hunted with, and I just think are outstanding hunters. I'm going to go with Hunter LeMasters, which he's the guy I hunted with in Idaho. Cameron Durr from Exodus. I've been around Cameron a lot. He's not hunted, very long in his entire life, but man, he's absorbed a lot of information from a lot of people, and he absolutely just learns and listens and doesn't take anybody's advice for granted. So,
yeah, exactly.
So those guys there, and then I'm gonna go with I would say my good buddy Dalton Michael. He's a good hunter, so I'd say those 3 guys right there are absolute killers, and I would bet money on them to kill just about anywhere in the country.
Nice, man. Well, buddy, I appreciate you coming on, and I'm hoping this year might be the year that I make it to West Virginia. If I do, I will keep you posted, and I hope.
I think Aaron's coming down, so you need to tag along with him and come down this year. So
nice, yeah. I know he and I keep talking about it, and I've talked about it with Josh Elderton. He and I have talked about it. I'm like, I just need to make it happen one of these years and get down there. So this might be the year. If it is, I will certainly let you know, man. And then I'm hoping I see you at Harrisburg. You going to be there?
Yeah, I'm going to come up the later half of the week that my wife's off work. I'm going to come up there, so I will be sure to see you, buddy.
All right, sounds good, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on, dude. Before I let you go, buddy, let everyone know that's listening where they can find out more about you, where they can follow along. And I know you got some stuff going on with some land sales too. Wait till properties, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So you can follow me at Tre_Kerns on Instagram, or we have a little hunting page called The Release. And then also, I'm a Whitetail Properties real estate agent here in West Virginia. So just Trey at whitetailproperties.com. But yeah, I appreciate it, Clint, and look forward to our conversation.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there as well. I'd be super appreciative if you do those couple things for me. Before I shut this thing down, I need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Spartan Forge, Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, and Genesee Beer. And until next time, we'll see y'all.